Hi, my name is Pip. I'm an author. I've published 2 books so far, The Hunted and A Night Rises. These are the first 2 books of the Phoenix series, which is a YA fantasy series that I've written. And I've been getting ready to publish book 3 in the series, and I've been thinking about the perils of being a self-published author, mostly because book 3 has been a bit of a hard slog to get done. And that's not because the story was difficult to write. I've had the story written in its most part since book 2 came out. It's just that the perils of being a self-published author got in the way, and here we are 2 years later. One of the primary reasons why I decided to self-publish was about retaining control. And this can cover a lot of areas. So I wanted to be able to retain control of my schedule. I was still working full-time. I was running a physio clinic. I had staff. They had life problems. Their life problems became mine. That meant I couldn't guarantee a publishing schedule, no matter how much I would like to. It also meant that rapid releasing is not really a thing that is feasible for me. My books are also like 150,000 words, so writing 150,000 words and editing 150,000 words takes time and costs money, and rapid release just wasn't a thing that was possible. I did sit on the first book a little bit so that the second book could be closer to being ready to go, and the plan had always been to have one that was almost ready for editing by the time you published the previous one, so that you pretty much were having a semi-regular kind of maybe yearly publishing schedule. But I didn't want to be on like a traditionally published author's timeline where they tell you when you're going to publish. Now, sometimes you might be ready to publish before that and they hold your book back and you can lose your momentum, or it can just be irritating. Or sometimes like life gets in the way and you're not ready to publish for whatever reason. Either the story's not there or it's still percolating in your brain, whatever. And they're sort of saying, well, look, you're contractually obligated to provide us with the next book in this series by this date. So where is it? And I wasn't in for that. I wasn't down for that. I didn't need that pressure on top of having employees that were dependent on me, especially during a pandemic. But I just didn't want that added stress. I wasn't interested. So I wanted to retain control of my schedule and how I published and the way I published. I wanted to have a major say in what the cover looked like, which is not something that necessarily is something that a traditionally published author gets a lot of say in, whereas this way I could choose it. But the trouble is, the perils of being self-published is that you live and die by the sword. So I chose my covers. I have recently had difficulties getting in touch with my cover designer, which has slowed down the publishing for book 3, but I'm not going to blame the slowness of publishing book 3 on her, because it is more that I just took forever to get around to it, and then life got in the way and she's got a situation that she's got to deal with, which means that she can't do it like when I want it done, which is fine, totally fine, and better planning needs to happen on my part. But you live and die by the sword. And it also means that when I decided the covers for the Phoenix series, that I wanted to still be obviously in touch with YA, because you know, you want your book to fit in the genre, but I wanted it to be different. I didn't want it to look like every other YA book. And the trouble with that is that some of the feedback that I've gotten is that they weren't sure that the books were about magic and things like that, just based on the cover. And people do judge books based on their cover, but that's me living and dying by the sword. It's a learning experience. Maybe I won't sell as many books as I would have with a different cover, but that's something I will learn about over time, and you've just got to be prepared to make those decisions if you want to stay in it. Whereas as a traditionally published author, like, you're being guided by people who have a financial interest in how well your book does. So you're not necessarily going to get the cover that is exactly what you want, because, you know, they got to make money too. The other reason I wanted to self-publish was because I wanted to maintain control over the rights of my work. Now, the likelihood is that my book will never be as big as I would like it to be. It would never be turned into a movie. But what if it is? What if it is? What if it does get turned into a movie? I don't want someone else to own the rights to that. I want to own the rights to that. I don't want someone else to be able to kind of manipulate my characters and create whatever they want over that because they own the rights to the characters and the story because I signed my life away to be a traditionally published author. No thanks. I also didn't want to deal with finding an agent, which to be honest is apparently a pain in the ass in Australia, and I'm not interested in a pain in my ass, so I just didn't even bother trying. The other reason I decided to self-publish was financial. Essentially, you can make more off each book sale as a self-published author because you don't have other people taking a bite of the pie. That being said, you've got to sell the book first. So it kind of works in roundabouts. So again, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. You make that decision to be a self-published author and everything is on you. You are now a business. You are now liable. You are now dealing with copyright issues. You are now dealing with the cost of self-publishing, which can be significant, especially in my case with editing a 150,000 word manuscript. And really, I feel like the cost of editing is an essential cost. It is something you shouldn't scrimp on because that can really affect the reader's experience of your book. And in my experience, it's really improved the quality of the story as well because they pick up holes that like are really necessary to be resolved. And sure, beta readers can do some of this, but it's not the same as a professional editor to have beta readers. But you know, to each their own, and everybody's financial situation is different and everybody's book is different. So, you know, again, live by the sword, die by the sword. But when you are traditionally published, they are doing editing for you and they are doing all of that stuff for you. But what they don't tell you is that often you have already spent money getting this book edited to a point where a publisher would look at it unless you already have a back catalog or a massive following on either social media or YouTube or whatever that are already following and invested in your story for whatever reason. So basically, in my view, you're already paying someone to edit it, so you might as well get the most financial reward from that you can. The perils of being a self-published author are that you have to work out how to market your book. And unless you are in marketing, this is a new skill for most of us to acquire. Where I have found this extremely difficult is that in running a physio practice, in having staff with dramas, you have to find time to do your 9-to-5 job or whatever time your job takes up, plus your family life, plus actual writing time, plus all your marketing. And doing the marketing might be something like this, creating content. It might be posting on Instagram, whatever, to bring your book into the awareness of other people. The thing is that for most of us, we don't know necessarily about all the products that are out there or all the companies that are out there or all the avenues for getting your book out there, like NetGalley, BookFunnel, all of those sorts of things, Draft to Digital. And so that involves a certain amount of research and a certain amount of trial and error. And trial and error inevitably has costs associated with it. The first one that springs to my mind is the book interior design layout. So I am not tech savvy, so there's a lot of things that I just can't do because I will probably break the computer. So I was kind of thinking, well, maybe book design layout is just, beyond me. The very first laptop I ever got, I opened it, turned it on, and then poured Coke all over it accidentally. So when I say I'm not good with tech, I really, truly mean it. So at the early stages of publishing the first book in the Phoenix series, which is called The Hunted, I was considering outsourcing getting the interior layout done, also because I was very time poor because I was running a business. And what I discovered was that people charge a fortune for that, and it's really not that hard. And if I can do it, you can do it. But anyway, basically I decided to do the book design layout myself because people were charging like $150 per book to do it. And if I was intending the Phoenix series to be a six-part series, that gets expensive. And there are going to be a lot of other unexpected costs over the process of getting a series out. And there are going to be a lot of editing costs. Like, I'm going to need that $150 to stay here with me. And so I tried, I think it was called the Book Design Template. It was the hardest program, and it was just difficult. I have done a different review about this on the channel. So if you really want to find that, you can find that. And then, so I had the cost of buying that program, which did not work. And then I had the cost of buying Vellum. And the trouble is you can't really try before you buy, really. And so you're paying for another program on top of it. And so the perils of being self-published is that you either need to be lucky or be knowledgeable and choose the correct program from the very beginning, or you maybe need to have mad skills, or you need to have a larger wallet. The researching ways that things are done or the avenues that you could go down, it takes time. And like, for example, there are a lot of amazing podcasts out there that will give you a lot of advice about marketing, about things like Draft to Digital. I think Draft to Digital even have a podcast. They will give you information about like book funnel and marketing ideas that work for you, that might work for you, and a whole range of topics. But the trouble is, it takes a long time to listen to a podcast, and there's often a lot of, just going to call it filler. It's probably a bit harsh, but a lot of filler at the beginning. And so you have to wade through various podcasts to find who has useful information, who has more filler, less info, who actually knows what they're talking about, and to find also consistencies between podcasts. Because if that's how you're doing your research, for example, and you're looking at, let's just stick with book interior design, and you're looking at things like Vellum and Draft to Digital and the Book Design Template, all the many options out there, you need to hear multiple perspectives about each product and what the pros and the cons are. So you've got to listen to a bunch of podcasts to hear people talk about their experience with it, or you're going to watch a bunch of YouTube videos about it, and all of that takes up time. And in the end, you still have to make a decision, and because things in publishing are always changing, you might find that by the time you've worked out how to do this, like I now use Vellum, and a lot of people are now talking about Book Funnel and Draft to Digital as that's the way to go, and Scrivener. And so you might find that you're like, oh God, maybe do I now have to change? And my experience was that I then tried Scrivener and it did not work for me. But conceptually, I really liked the idea of Scrivener. But then again, I've paid $40 or whatever it was for Scrivener, and I now don't touch it. So you kind of have this difficulty when being a self-published author that you've got to wade through everything and work out what is the best direction for you, what are the best products for you, how is this going to work into your life, what is the costs associated with each thing, and how much time is it going to take up. Because for me, the biggest thing was time. If it took me 20 hours or something insane to use the book template design program and to get something which was non-ideal in terms of book design template, like that's 20 hours that I could have been writing. That's 20 hours that I could have been seeing patients. That's a lot of money to have missed out because I used a program that was non-ideal. And so if I'm going to work on something for 20 hours, I want it to have a return. And so the return on investment for that is extremely low. Whereas me spending 20 hours as a physio seeing patients, the return is much, much higher. So I was really looking at things about how much time is this going to take? How can I streamline this process for myself? And Vellum took me like 20 minutes to do the same thing that took me 20 hours on the other thing. So even though I had to spend like $250 or whatever it was to get Vellum, it is 100% worth that money if I can do that in 20 minutes or even an hour, and then have 19 other available hours to go to work and make an income, or to work on my manuscript, or to do something else. One of the other perils of being a self-published author that I've been thinking about is that you don't necessarily have access to as much feedback as a traditionally published author without deliberately seeking it out. So this is where beta readers come in, but you've got to find beta readers who are not going to stuff you around and waste your time, and who are actually going to give you helpful information back and to critique your work in a way that is useful, and to ideally write reviews for your book ahead of time. I didn't do this. I found it really, really hard to find beta readers that were legit. I found it really, really difficult to find beta readers. I found that really hard. But if you're a traditionally published author, you've got that whole publishing house. They've got editors that are in-house. They've got cover designers that are in-house. They've got, they've got a machine that is going to provide you with feedback. They're going to say, hey, this doesn't work in this story. We don't like that. That's not politically correct. Maybe you should go down a different route. Maybe you should do this. So you're going to get a lot more feedback as just part of the publishing process if you're traditionally published, whereas you're going to have to seek that out and determine what is useful and what is not, all on your own if you're a self-published author. But it does go both ways. So you might end up taking feedback or being subject to feedback as a traditionally published author because you are contractually bound to, and end up, for example, with a cover that you don't love because you are traditionally published and you have kind of sacrificed some of your control in order to be in that position, which is awesome. But there are pros and cons to everything. I've recently had issues with the cover design for book 3. As I said, there are issues that are not mine to talk about that basically meant my cover designer went MIA. So this means that as a self-published author, I've now got a very big problem. So either I have to find a new cover designer, which means that either it's not necessarily going to fit perfectly with the design flow, and it means that all the choices that I made to try and make the 6 books cohesive right at the beginning are then potentially voided by the fact that I have to bring in a second cover designer because my cover designer is not available. Or I have to recover the first 2 books to have a different theme now that I have a new cover designer, which is going to have cost implications. Or I have to bide my time and hope that my cover designer reappears and that we can get this done, which will mean that my publishing schedule is altered from what I intended. Now, I am in no way saying that this is the fault of my cover designer. This is life. And as a self-published author, this is something you have to consider. What are you going to do if your designer just decides they want a career change? What are you going to do if a pandemic gets in the way and their life gets real and shit happens and suddenly they're not available to you for whatever reason and it throws a spanner in the works? What are you going to do? Like, these are issues that I didn't necessarily think about when I started. I certainly didn't think we were going to have a pandemic. I didn't think there was going to be trouble getting in contact with my cover designer. I didn't think it was going to be 2.5 months before I heard from her. Like, these are things that happen, and it's not that you necessarily need to have a contingency plan, but these are things that you need to deal with as a self-published author. These are problems that you could potentially have. Even things like you just got the cover design wrong and you need to rebrand and redo your covers to actually get success from your novels. These are problems that you are going to have to personally deal with as a self-published author and personally confront that traditionally published authors are just not going to have the same problems. So then we got the elephant in the room, the pandemic. How does that affect self-published authors? Well, in every way. So you may no longer be working your 9-to-5 job, and then how do you finance your book? People who you were working with, like my cover designer, for example, shit may get real for them, and so they're no longer available for your book. Then what are you going to do? Pandemics change marketing plans. Pandemics change marketing games. Then what are you going to do? Pandemics add huge amounts of stress into people's lives. Are you still going to have the time to write, the energy to write? Are you going to be burnt out? I really struggled with burnout after doing last year in the pandemic, owning a healthcare practice, being allergic to surgical masks, and having all the dramas that come with a pandemic and living in a country where lockdowns are really savage and have a massive effect on businesses. Like, I was hella burnt out. I didn't really want to write much and didn't even really have the brain power to do anything for months. You've also got the very real implications of health problems. What happens if you get sick? What happens? Who's going to write the books? What happens to your publishing schedule? Who's going to do the marketing? All that stuff. What happens if you get sick, or if you have a baby, or if something happens like that? All of that is now on you as a self-published author, and that is something that you need to be aware of. I've had burnout this year. I've had health problems. I've had dental negligence that led to massive infections that left me feeling like shit. And these things, they happen and they affect the writing process. They affect how efficient you are. They affect how diligent you are with marketing. They affect how much research into the various avenues that you could go down or the various products that you could use as an author. It affects everything. And to think otherwise and to just think that as a self-published author you have freedom and that it's going to be easy is flawed. But there are massive benefits to being self-published, many of which I have already talked about. And one of those benefits is the freedom. You can literally do whatever you want. Doesn't mean it's going to work, but you can do whatever you want. As a traditionally published author, you don't have that freedom. People have a vested financial and contractual interest in what you are doing, and you have obligations that have to be met. But there are difficulties with being a self-published author. There is a lot of stuff you've got to stay on top of, a lot of research you've got to do, and a lot of writing and content production you've got to do. And you only have 24 hours in a day. And inevitably, people have families and jobs and other things that take up a large amount of time too. So the major difficulty in my eyes of being a self-published author is trying to find a way to make all those things fit into 24 hours. And I can't say that I've found the way. I really struggle with finding the time to listen to podcasts about writing and authorly subjects and products that are out there. And because especially when I'm working, at the end of the day, I don't feel like listening to more work. I feel like letting loose. I feel like escapism. And that is sometimes where writing comes in for me. Like, writing can be escapism because you can disappear into a completely different world and get lost there and leave the rest of your day behind. But that is often where other things come into play, like hanging out with your friends, traveling, listening to music. So I find that it is difficult for me to give up my free time to continue to do more work. It's just the realities of the situation. Editing me, just jumping back in to clarify that part of the issue with things like social media in terms of being an author in general, really, and particularly with being a indie author, is the time that it takes, because part of making your social media really effective is being part of the community, interacting with people, generating content that people want to comment on, but also like being part of conversations on Twitter and being part of that sort of stuff. And all of that takes a lot of time. And it is a little bit more complicated by things like time zones. So for example, I find that by the time I find conversations and things like that that I want to participate in on Twitter or whatever, because I'm in Australia, a lot of those conversations already happened while I was asleep, and so I'm late to them. And it just makes it a little bit more tricky to kind of break into the writing community and be part of that and enjoy the benefits of the lift of a writing community. It doesn't make it impossible, but the time that those things take, the time that marketing takes, the time that social media takes, the time that learning and listening to podcasts and research and things like that all takes away from actual writing time, but they're all sort of necessary things that have to happen. So part of the perils of being an indie author is finding a way to manage each part of that, finding a way to manage your writing time and balance it off with your learning time, your engagement time, and social media marketing time, and then balancing that with life and family and work and life. Something else that I may have not mentioned already is that with traditionally published authors, I mean, they're not guaranteed a salary, but at least they're generally guaranteed a little bit of a marketing push by their publisher, although the amount of push can be hugely variable and the author can still have to do the majority of the pushing. But there is still usually some sort of financial compensation, whereas as an indie author, there's a lot of costs, but no guarantee of income. So your likelihood of receiving income depends on your success when marketing, when researching, when putting together your book, when creating a quality content, creating a quality product. All of those things, and to be honest, a little bit of luck, determine whether you are going to be at least breaking even, let alone making an income. So while you may retain the rights to your product and have the ability to do whatever you want with it and market it and publish it however you like, it can really be difficult to break even. And I believe there's a fairly ominous statistic related to how often authors who are indie published break even, let alone make money. I have no idea what that stat is, and I couldn't find it when I was looking for it, but yeah. So just be aware that enjoying the perks of being an indie author, like the fact that we can make more royalties per sale, doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to break even or even be able to make some sort of income, let alone be able to quit your job and become a full-time writer. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but there's a lot of work involved. In no way am I trying to put you off self-publishing. It's been a ride. But there are a lot of things that I didn't know about before going in that I kind of wish I did. I don't think I would have made a different decision, because ultimately what it comes down to for me is that I made this choice to retain control. So I don't think I would have made a different choice. But I think I probably would have done different things along the publishing route. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and to subscribe to my channel. It really helps it grow, and I would really, really appreciate it. Also, you can check me out on Instagram and Twitter at Pip Coombs, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.